I I was going to take the time and write out a little introduction and properly theme this thing out, but I decided to go ahead and wing it like I normally do. So this is like take three, so hopefully this will be the final, but we'll see. Um, anyway, I'm gonna do an out on music uh, video again, and I did one a few days ago, and it was pretty well received, and it was shared a little bit wider than my usual videos. So that was gratifying. I'm going to be doing a whole ton of different kinds of music on here and different thoughts about, basically my experiences with music, how it's changed my life, shaped my life, and what resonates with me. Um, Last time I talked a bit about uh, black metal and fulfilling the promise of metal and all that stuff, which sounded good at the time, I guess. But I didn't want anybody to think it's going to turn into a metal um, column. It's not going to be that at all. Probably quite the contrary. But be that as it may, the only way I could really launch into a series on music that resonates with me is really to talk about my favorite band, who happens to be a heavy metal band. Um, we all know as Black Sabbath. So, I could go back and recite the history of the band from the beginning to now, like everyone else has done a million times. I could even count down my favorite albums in order, backwards down to one, like I did in my old blog in a big, long essay. Um, but as with all the stuff I do on here, this is going to be extremely non-linear. So, I guess that's just the way I communicate, for better or ill. And so I'm probably just going to communicate this in terms of my experiences with Black Sabbath. So they're just mine. They're mine, all mine. And others may differ or vary. Your mileage may vary, as some people have said online. Uh, what is that? YMMV. Yeah. So if you encounter that acronym, that's what it means. Your mileage may vary. My mileage tends to vary a lot from the average driver. So um, I'm looking at a little video here. Okay, well, we're not supposed to say the word bootleg. It's a live recording. Um, that's an in joke for anyone who used to shop at Repo Records here in Charlotte years ago. I doubt that's anyone I'm talking at right now, but you never know. But this right here is, I'm gonna pause it and turn it down. But this kind of thing is where it started in earnest for me. I don't know if you can hear that or not. I'm not sure how much of this tune kind of bleeds in through the sound on this thing. Sometimes when I sit too far back, the sound gets muffled and distorted. But that's the opening of Children of the Sea by Black Sabbath. This is from a show they did in Oakland, November 13th, 1992. Kind of a historic show for a lot of reasons. I'll get to that eventually. But it's one of my favorite live shows by this particular lineup of the band. And this is my favorite song by this band. So I thought it'd be cool to be feeling those vibes while I'm talking. And so if I start headbanging or doing this thing, you'll understand, I'm sure, and forgive me, I hope. Um, right there, see? It's happening already. Um, so I was looking at this People magazine when I was way little, and there was this article about this band Black Sabbath. I didn't know what they were. I asked my mom, and she was like something like they're devil worshippers or something to that effect. Um, so then, about 3 or 4 years later, um, I started hearing on classic rock radio that I listened to here in town. It was WROQ back then. I started hearing Paranoid, um, and I loved it. I didn't know what to make of it, as I did with a lot of rock back then. It was very new to me and exciting, and I was trying to decipher the lyrics. There goes Dio. So um, I think I think I just kind of would be eagerly anticipating whenever it would come on the radio. It took me a while to find out it was Black Sabbath. I think a couple of the DJs said it was Ozzy, or Ozzy with Black Sabbath, because Ozzy was at least around here arguably much bigger than Black Sabbath uh, at that time. Ozzy solo. We're talking about Ozzy Osbourne, by the way. I'm sure everyone knows that. Um, and I didn't know really in my ignorance. So around, I don't know, within the next few months, it turned out the Black Sabbath was going to play in Charlotte. Um, and this was on the Mob Rules tour. Um, so, the group that was coming out on tour and coming to Charlotte was a bit different configuration than the one I read about in People magazine a few years earlier when I was a wee tot. Um, but anyway, I was still pretty young, and I hadn't gotten to the point where I went to rock shows yet. I was a pretty sheltered child and teenager, and at this point, I was still kind of a preteen, and there was a kid in my class named Jody Fleming. Who knows what happened to this cat? And he was a big time bully. He bullied me a lot. And one way he tried to out badass the other children was um, by being into hard rock. I would say heavy metal, but really, as far as in hindsight, the only heavy metal band really that he was into was Black Sabbath. So he went around and he was doing the devil's horns, and he was screaming about the Satan, and teachers were kind of repulsed. And one day he smuggled in a jam box, and um, I heard Iron Man for the first time, and that incredible sound, that ow, it's like, I don't know, man. It was one of the most evil things I'd ever heard. I thought it was amazing. Um, and he was like, "Yeah, Ozzy's coming, Black Sabbath's coming." Of course, Ozzy was not coming. There are all these rumors that keep hearing Ozzy's back with Black Sabbath. I didn't know who sang for Black Sabbath. I didn't know anyone's name in Black Sabbath. So I had a really good friend named Doug Williams, who I still know to this day. He's a great guy. Um, he said, "Yeah, man, it's some guy named James Del Rio or something." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, James Del Rio, no problem." But by this time, I had heard a little bit of Ozzy on the radio, some songs from Diary of a Madman, which was then very popular and somewhat current. Um, I didn't hear until a number of months later that his guitarist had died, Randy Rhoads, um, and then they started playing him a lot on the rock radio stations. On this particular station, I listened to a kind of a medium to soft rock station, WBC. I don't know if it was WBCY. It was 108, but I don't FM, but I don't remember the call letters. They even played a little bit of Ozzy off of the Diary of a Madman once in a while. They never played Black Sabbath ever, never ever. Um, and I was starting to enjoy these really harder edge sounding bands. By this time I was like kind of pretty knee deep into Queen, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and a whole bunch of kind of schmaltzy bands that I, some of which I later, evolved beyond, I guess you could say, like Journey and Foreigner, and some that, I've had it on and off dealing with over the years, like the Cars, who I actually don't think is cheesy anymore. Um, they've done some cheesy songs, but they've also done some brilliant songs. Um, but yeah, I was into that kind of range, medium to sort of hard rock, and I was leaning onto the hard rock side. And I think part of my deal is also trying to keep up with these kids at school who bullied me, and some people get into rock music, to get women, to get laid. That's a popular reason for playing rock music or listening to rock music or collecting rock albums. And later on, that did hold some appeal to some women in my life that I knew that would excite them, with my record collection. But generally, that was a super geeky, exclusively male thing back then. Or at least that's how it appeared. At least that's how it was in these here parts, this neck of the universe. So I wanted to kind of keep up with the Joneses and see what this was about. And what's funny is uh, a number of things grew out of this that kind of set a tenor for a lot of my life, actually. Um, is that I would glom onto these things and try to see what the fuss was about, so to speak. And then they would connect with me. And the people who, mocked me for not being hip or cool, not being into those things, invariably I would exceed them in terms of knowledge of and passion for a particular subject. And to the point where years later, you know, I would be some kind of crazy savant about this stuff. And they had completely discarded that, it was just a phase, or, I mean, they were too good for that. Yet again, they were too good for me. But I knew better. By then, I thought the reverse. I thought, no, more knowledge is better than less knowledge. So if I now know more about these rock bands and I'm more passionate about them than you are, and you're the one who spurred me into getting into them by mocking me daily for being a pussy, as I was constantly called in school, for not liking that stuff or not being aware, even you're being ignorant, and then to turn around and be like, no, and it turns out that they were, to use level a word against them, that they probably would level against someone else. They were posers, they were, hollow men and women, so to speak. Though really, women didn't mock me about this stuff. They mocked me about other stuff, but not about not about rock music. But in any case, this kid Jody Fleming was like one of those. He's the kind of guy who, you look back and you think, I didn't have the moves back then. I wasn't coordinated, but if I'd been even a little bit, I should have punched that guy back. He constantly was punching me, and also looking back and thinking, man, this guy, he had the smallest penis on earth. I mean, or maybe the largest clitoris. I don't know. I mean, he certainly was a big dick, and but I got to credit him. He did help whet my appetite for this band. So I was a quick study, but I still was a bit trepidous about this because I was still a little wary about evil music and such. I mean, I enjoyed dark imagery in the comic books I read, but it couldn't go beyond a certain point. I mean, I was very squeamish. I was very sensitive. Um, I had seen Heavy Metal Magazine, and it had seriously disturbed me in junior high. It was an upsetting experience to me. All that gore and violence and nudity, and it just, wow. I mean, I'm looking back now and I'm thinking I'm like a wholly different person, but that's who I was in junior high, and I was tremendously backward socially and sheltered and unaware of a lot of things, but they were happening around the fringes, the periphery of my existence. and I was fascinated by them. And that fascination has grown over the years to where now I can look back at that time and go, wow, there were some incredibly cool things that were going on in my life when I was really young that now mean a great deal to me. Things happening in the world, specifically in the world of arts. And uh, I was only dimly aware of them. And I could have been wide awake to their pleasures at a really young age. I mean, really ahead of the curve. And there were young guys who were like that, though it was years before I would meet anyone like that. They weren't at my school, my junior high or high school. But I did have some friends who were ahead of me as far as were already exploring, like the aforementioned Doug Williams. I mean, he didn't always give me the correct facts at the time, but he had a much better indication of what this rock music thing was about, and rock and roll and heavy metal and everything. And there were kids in school who would make fun of me for liking Queen, and that was interesting because Queen was heavier and had more substance than the majority of bands that they liked. But they weren't edgy enough for them. They weren't Led Zeppelin, they weren't Black Sabbath, they weren't Pink Floyd. They were all gay and silly, cheesy shit. Flash Gordon, comic books. That's the rap I got for a few years for liking Queen. Queen was the first rock band I became bonded to and obsessed with when I saw the movie Flash Gordon, and still think that's one of the greatest soundtracks ever, and still love that music today. Of course, now it's very, very fashionable to like Queen because of Bohemian Rhapsody, but then again, Queen has gone up and down in fashion throughout my life. I mean, We Will Rock You was ubiquitous when I was a child and ubiquitous, and so was Another One Bites the Dust. These riffs, these choruses, they were everywhere. You couldn't escape them. Queen was part of the soundtrack of my youth, um, but I wanted it in the forefront. So, I just happened upon it as a youngster, uh, Flash Gordon soundtrack, and then immediately after, my mom bought me Live Killers, which was new at the time, a live album, relatively new, and then their newest album within a few months, which was The Game, which I think also came out before Flash. It was like uh, Live Killers, The Game, Flash Gordon. So I bought them in the order: Flash Gordon, Live Killers, The Game, and um, I was obsessed with this group, and somehow Led Zeppelin worked their way into that, and Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd, I liked the music, but also like the sorrowfulness of the lyrics, and that I could relate to a lot, even though I, obviously had not experienced a fraction of that stuff sung about back then, much less drugs and divorce and all these other heavy topics that Roger Waters was writing about. Um, but still, the vibe of it helped get me through. Um, Zeppelin was like my compromise band, you know, uh, they were this hard rock group that it was okay to be into, that it was cool for everyone to like, and that's not why I liked them, but it did make it easier to get into them and easier to hear their stuff from other people and learn about them. I'm just, for the record, I'm not a Led Zeppelin fan anymore. That's kind of like a former life of mine. I don't really like them as a band. I like some songs. About a year and a half ago, I sat down on YouTube and listened to, what had been my favorite songs of theirs, and parts of some of their albums. And a lot of them held up for me, and a lot of them didn't. And a lot of them I was just ho hum about. So I can't name one album of theirs that I love all the way through. Um, so I know I'm in a tiny minority in the world of rock music, but rock isn't the only kind of music I like. So these kind of considerations I had when I was in junior high are irrelevant to now. They're not any kind of metric for anything today. But I'm just taking you back to then. So Black Sabbath kind of started to break things apart for me. like what I was yearning for to find sonically and lyrically in a band, but didn't really realize it yet. And the devil was a big obstacle. You know, the devil has been rock and roll's best friend for many years. You know, other than fucking, you know, rock and roll has been talking a lot about the devil and his evil deeds. You know, and of course partying in general, but specifically about sex, which goes all the way back to jazz and blues. Um, but absolutely, yeah, the devil was a popular subject in rock music and in blues. Um, and so one night I was listening to this show on WRQ kind of late at night. I guess it was like 1 a.m. It may have been a school night. It may not have been. I think it was actually. And, you know, I was supposed to already be asleep and I had it turned down fairly low. And this guy named Gilboni, he called himself the Great Gilboni. He was a DJ. I don't know if anyone will remember him. My friend John Allen probably will remember him. I would think maybe. Seems like he and I didn't talked about him once, but I don't know. That could have been in a dream. I don't know. But anyway, my cat's coming over here. Hey, hey, boy, get out of there. He's getting into mischief while I'm recording. Um, this Gilboni guy, this DJ played this song I thought was like the most evil song I'd ever heard. It was extremely heavy, and the lyrics, hello, the lyrics from what I could remember, um, were very, you know, evil. The way it was delivered was evil. But it was so enticing to me, and I longed to hear that song again. And I kept trying to figure out what song it was. I mean, I realized pretty quickly that it was Black Sabbath, but I didn't know. Kal-El. I'm recording. You're being rude. He's like, what the fuck? Um, so it was like a quest to find out what this holy or unholy uh, tune was. Um, Several months more went by, and WRQ played a song on the radio uh, called "Children of the Sea," and it was the version on the then brand new album Live Evil, and I I loved it immediately. It just had power and passion, and then I realized, you know, I learned the singer was named Ronnie James Dio, and you know, I asked Doug about that, and he's like, yeah, of course it's Ronnie James Dio. He didn't remember calling him James Del Rio or whatever, and that's all good. I don't expect didn't expect him to then, and I certainly don't now. He'll probably be like, this that never happened, um, but yeah. So basically, I I was kind of entranced by this, and I had a couple of friends who also liked it and who seemed to know a little bit more about Black Sabbath than I did by then. I made it kind of a mission to um, get that album, and you know, I had a feeling my mom, she was already kind of acting wonky about, you know, buying me Queen and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd albums, and even I don't know, she was okay with me buying me a Boston album. I loved their first album one time too. Sorry, and you know, that was cool with them, but you know, with her, I mean, but you know, the darker it got, like Pink Floyd, she caught me listening to The Wall, which she had bought me grudgingly, with my head between two like small speakers, and she was like, "You're crazy." And my mom rarely said stuff like that to me back then, but later, yeah, but so that was a bit, you know, wow, okay, and maybe she wasn't, maybe that was part of the connection, you know, Pink Floyd. Maybe I was having a very young uh, resonance with mental illness, you know, the other fellow mentally ill people who are expressing it through art and such. That kind of makes sense to me now, but all those years ago, you know, um, but So she bought me Live Evil. We went to this place called Ernie's Record Store, Ernie's Records. They were very close to my house, not quite enough to walk to, but pretty close. And after school one day, my mom bought me this. It was a double LP vinyl record, two records, and it was all live, all Black Sabbath, and it was all done by Ronnie James Dio singing and doing songs from apparently his era and Ozzy's era, and that included Paranoid and Iron Man, which I had heard before. And Children of the Sea was on there, and that really evil song I loved late at night. It was called Voodoo, and I liked the live version. But when I later heard the studio version again, finally after all that time, it blew my head off. Still, and I still just light up when I hear Voodoo, that riff. But or maybe darken up, I don't know, but darken down. But those were interesting times, and I would listen to it on my parents' stereo in the living room before my dad would come home and try to turn it up as high as I could, which wasn't very high. My mom was watching soap operas, and I was watching soap operas with her, usually like Guiding Light around that time of day, and then there'd be some talk show would come on. I mean, this was before Montel Williams, I guess, but that kind of was before. I don't know if it was before Oprah or not. It might have been during the borning years of or the birthing years of Oprah, but I want to say it was before even Oprah. But there were some talk shows on in the afternoon. Who knows? It may have been way back. You know, it may have been like Merv Griffin and fucking Mike Douglas for all I remember. But so I got obsessed with it, and so I had this little record player in my room, and I would listen to it on there. And I wanted a stereo, but my mom didn't buy me one for a little while. But she finally did buy me a small stereo. And actually, I think the small stereo came before Live Evil. I think my mom bought me that because of the growing rock music, and because I was scratching up records that I was checking out at the library to listen to, mainly Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung. I was very into that at a really young age, I will say. Not rock music, but pretty powerful stuff. And because I remember that stereo was the one that she caught me listening to Pink Floyd between the speakers with. And so I had to move my party from the living room for the more powerful stereo of my parents, which in hindsight wasn't very powerful, but to me it was like, a monolith, to my little setup, which was like a little record player. And there was like a speaker about this big and another speaker about that big. And yeah, I mean, they had cords. I could kind of move them around. Didn't have headphones then. I was super low tech. But then I became really obsessed with Live Evil. And I learned all the songs inside out, wrote the lyrics down, and inside of it was a gatefold with a piece of a big paper thing that was kind of like an ad or whatever for all of their albums up to that point. So it had which is basically all their studio albums, plus compilation. We sold our soul for rock and roll, and terminated with Live Evil. And so I learned the album covers and the album titles, and that began my quest. I was like, I've got to hear all this. And so keep in mind, at that time, I had never heard War Pigs, Children of the Grave, Black Sabbath, the song. I mean, I had only heard NIB, only heard Dio singing them first. So, that's interesting. I can compare Iron Man and Paranoid, with the versions because I was starting to hear Iron Man on WRQ more regularly also. And I did prefer those studio versions to the way Dio did them on Live Evil. But I didn't really have that point of reference or anything else that Ozzy did. And so shortly after that, I started hearing Ozzy's live album, Speak of the Devil, which, I think obviously was put out as a kind of a fuck you to Black Sabbath Live Evil. We're going to do our live album. oh, but we're only going to do songs that Ozzy did with like Sabbath. We're not going to do any of the Randy Rhoads songs. And, there was some talk about, well, Ozzy's sad because Randy died. And of course he was sad, but so he wasn't going to do a live album of that material yet. That would have made sense. Instead, he did a live album of Black Sabbath material, and it became a huge seller. Live Evil was also a big seller, but not to the extent of Ozzy, Speak of the Devil. Speak of the Devil, the guitarist was Brad Gillis from Night Ranger. I don't even like the way Randy Rhoads played Black Sabbath songs, to be honest. Even though I love stuff Randy Rhoads did with Ozzy, those two studio LPs are great. He was a great guitar player, but um, he never reached Tony Iommi level to me. He never sounded that heavy, dark, or menacing, or sonically inventive for that matter. He was just kind of fast and tweedly. And at that age, I did kind of like fast and tweedly, but not as much as a lot of my friends did. So by this time, I had some friends who were kind of metalheads, who were younger than me. One kid my age, and then a friend that he introduced me to who was 2 years younger than me. And I've talked about him on my Flickr Street stuff. And this guy I called JJ. And JJ was like, yeah, I love Ozzy, I love Black Sabbath, but he also I love Van Halen, I love, and I wasn't really into that kind of stuff, the party metal, the party music. That just never lit a flame with me. Eventually, I explored all of that because I just was on a quest to know everything about rock music and to hear every rock band. And, I didn't have a big discernment filter back then. I was learning how to build one, and I was constructing it as I went. And now I realize not all heavy rock is good, not all heavy metal is good, not all rock music is good. Not all music about the devil is good. I mean, it's just, a discernment, which I didn't have when I was like 15 years old. So, um, I was in a position where JJ had a neighbor who played in a band, and we went over and listened to him play one day. Just play guitar, just him, electric guitar. It was very loud to me back then. It was extremely loud. Probably wasn't as loud as I play mine now, but so I was like, "Can you record me? Can you tape me these songs?" And there are all these songs that off the rock radio station I listened to that I wanted him to record, like the Def Leppard, which was new at the time, but not they weren't new, but that album not Pyromania. Was it Pyromania? This huge album that had Centerfold or whatever. um, what is it called? Autograph? I don't know. Whatever that song. Centerfold was Jay Giles' band. But this song was kind of similar. I don't need no photograph, or I don't know, man. I can't remember that song, but I did not like Def Leppard. But back then, Def Leppard were considered like really cutting edge heavy metal because the singer kind of aped Bon Scott quite a bit for AC/DC, and AC/DC was a scary band too that people were really afraid to get into. With songs like "If You Want Blood," albums like "If You Want Blood," "We Got It," or whatever, and "Highway to Hell," and you know, they were evil as shit. So um, they were. So I got a little interested in them too, and so this guy that JJ knew, his name was Mark, and Mark taped me these songs, and then he was like, "Man, it takes me too long to, I'm getting off school, I go to work, I come home, man, I can't record." Just pick out all these songs off these different albums because he had all the vinyl, he had all the albums, that were current and back out, but back catalog stuff too. He's like, let me just like record a whole album for you, like one on each side of a 90-minute cassette, okay? That way I can just let it play, just turn it over once and then turn the tape over, turn it over again, instead of like constantly, with this. And I was like, I thought he was being mean to me, and I kind of was a little hurt, but he made total sense. Of course, I didn't argue with him. I was kind of in awe of the guy. Not like JJ was, like, oh, he's a rock guitar god and he's my friend, my neighbor. But it's more like, he's older than me, he knows what he's talking about, and he's going to help mentor me on this shit. And so I proffered myself as a willing disciple. And he recorded me a number of albums that kind of changed my life to varying degrees, and on those two-sided cassette tapes. And I would take them and listen to them. He would give them to me at school, and I would listen to them in the library in the sound room, which is the soundproof room. They called it the sound room. Listened to it a lot, almost every day for a while on my lunch breaks, and that was like really a solace for me, man. By that time, I was in the 10th grade, and I think a 10th grade, and a lot of, yeah, I was depressed, I was angst ridden, so I needed this shit, man. And so the Black Sabbath albums he recorded for me were, I still remember this, on one 90-minute tape, he recorded for me Master of Reality on one side and Never Say Die on the other. So finally, I get to hear two Ozzy albums all the way through, and from two different phases of the Ozzy era. And then he also recorded me the one I listened to the most, which was Black Sabbath, the first album, Black Sabbath, uh, on one side, and Mob Rules. I specifically had asked for Mob Rules. So I finally had Voodoo, and I heard Voodoo, and I was like, ah. I just listened to it over and over, and it was evil as hell, man. So anyway, uh, thus began my lifelong love affair in earnest with Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath, Geezer Butler, Ronnie James Dio, um, and some love and passion also for Bill Ward, Ozzy Osbourne, Vinny Appice, and etc. So, uh, mind you, I still never heard the album Heaven and Hell, the studio album, the first one that Dio did with them. And I had not heard most of the Ozzy. I had now only heard 3 studio albums out of 8. So I had a lot of catching up to do. But I listened to those albums over and over. I transcribed the lyrics to Mob Rules. Dio became like a lyrical god to me. And, I guess my lyrical god prior to that might have been maybe Roger Waters. So I'm going to wrap up with that note, pardon the pun. And I'm watching this video still in the background, hearing it. Tony's blazing through this, wah-wah soaked guitar solo. Yeah, we'll talk more about Tony next time. We'll talk more about all of this, but this is just kind of the beginning of how I discovered Black Sabbath, and just the kind of person I was when they kind of changed my existence forever, and they continue to. Their sound continues to kind of mold and shape my life in the background more now, but I still get involved. I am passionate about hearing their music regularly, and I can't really say that about too many bands that I've been into that long. Um, Especially rock bands from that era that I got into. I rarely ever listen to Pink Floyd or Queen anymore, for instance, even though I still enjoy some of their stuff quite a bit. But anyway, I'm gonna take a hike here, and thank you. The Devil's Horns will assume more meaning now that we're talking about Black Sabbath. But anyway, it also means I love you in sign language, I believe. So I love you. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.